Imagine a kingdom so wealthy that even its dust glimmered like sunlight, a place where kings bathed in gold, where lakes hid ancient treasures, and where an empire's greatest secret refused to die. This is the legend of El Dorado, the city of gold that never died. Chapter 1. The Origin of a Legend. Legends don't appear out of thin air. They grow slowly, silently, rooted in ancient memories, sacred rituals, and the echoes of civilizations long forgotten. And the legend of El Dorado is no different. To understand how this myth rose to become one of the greatest stories of the New World, we must travel back centuries to a time when the jungles of South America were home to kingdoms that thrived long before Europeans ever dreamed of crossing the Atlantic. Our journey begins in the highlands of what is now Colombia, a land once ruled by the Muisca people, masters of goldwork, astronomy, and spiritual ceremony. To them, gold wasn't currency. It wasn't wealth. It was sunlight made solid, a sacred material believed to carry the essence of divine power. Gold shimmered in their temples, their jewelry, their art, and their rituals. And it was from one ritual in particular that the legend of El Dorado would be born. This ritual centered around the rise of a new ruler, a moment of transition and transformation. When a Muisca leader, known as the Zipa, was chosen to ascend the throne, he didn't receive a crown, nor did he sit atop a golden seat. Instead, he embraced a far more mystical initiation. Before his people, at the edge of a sacred lake nestled between towering mountains, the soon-to-be ruler was covered from head to toe in fine gold dust. He became a living statue, glittering, radiant, a human embodiment of the sun god. The Muisca believed that by coating their king in gold, they were binding him to the spiritual forces that governed their world. Once prepared, the glowing ruler stepped onto a raft made of reeds, adorned with burning torches and offerings crafted from gold and emeralds. The raft drifted slowly across the water, towards the center of Lake Guatavita, a place believed to be a gateway between the human world and the realm of the gods. As thousands watched in silence, the Zipa bowed his head and submerged himself in the lake's dark, still waters. The gold dust on his skin dissolved into shimmering clouds, turning the surface of the lake into a sheet of liquid sunlight. The priests accompanying him cast offerings into the water, bracelets, figurines, sacred ornaments, each one meant to appease the gods and ensure prosperity for the tribe. To the Muisca, this ritual wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't a treasure hunt. It was faith. But to outsiders, especially the Spanish conquistadors who arrived in the early 1500s, this story was something else entirely. They heard of a gold-covered king bathing in a sacred lake, surrounded by treasures thrown into the depths. And to men who had crossed oceans chasing fortune, this wasn't a religious ceremony. It was a promise of unimaginable wealth hidden somewhere in the New World. The Spanish gave the ritual a name, El Dorado, the Golden One. At first, it referred only to the gold-coated ruler. But human imagination has a way of transforming stories. The Golden One became a golden city. The golden city became a golden kingdom. And soon, explorers believed that somewhere in the heart of the continent lay an entire empire built with riches beyond the limits of human greed. But how did such a misunderstanding become one of the most enduring myths in history? Part of the answer lies in timing. Europe, in the age of conquest, was obsessed with gold. Empires were rising and falling based on the flow of precious metals from the Americas. The slightest rumor of wealth could set armies in motion. So, when whispers spread of a land where gold was not merely treasured, but thrown into lakes as offerings, the imagination of the old world ignited. Another part of the answer lies in mystery. The Muisca kept no written language. Their stories, their rituals, their beliefs, everything was passed down orally. By the time Spanish chroniclers attempted to describe the ceremony, much had already been lost or misunderstood. This left enormous gaps, and those gaps were filled with dreams, exaggerations, and the fantasies of explorers hungry for glory. In the end, a simple ritual of spiritual renewal transformed into a legend so powerful that it would lure countless men into jungles, mountains, and swamps. It would shape maps, fuel expeditions, and drive explorers to madness. But before all of that, El Dorado was just a moment, a single ceremony on a quiet mountain lake, lit by torches and starlight, where a king offered gold not to human greed, but to the gods. This is where the legend began, not with a city, not with a kingdom, but with a solitary king, shimmering like the sun, rising from the waters of Lake Guatavita. Chapter 2. The Hunt for the City of Gold. The legend of El Dorado spread across the New World like a spark tossed into dry grass, small at first, but destined to become an unstoppable blaze. What began as a Muisca ritual had already taken shape in the minds of the Spanish as something far greater. And soon, the rumor of a golden king transformed into a feverish belief in a golden city, a place where riches lay not in vaults, but in streets, walls, temples, everywhere the eye could see. But legends demand seekers, and the story of El Dorado would not have burned so brightly without the men who chased it. They were soldiers, dreamers, drifters, fortune hunters, driven by ambition, greed, or something far more dangerous, hope. The first great hunter of El Dorado was Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada, a Spanish lawyer turned conquistador. Unlike others who attacked from the sea, Quesada marched inland, from the scorching northern coast of South America, through brutal jungles and towering mountains, into lands no European had ever seen. His expedition began with nearly 800 men. Only a fraction survived. The heat melted armor, insects carried disease, rivers swallowed horses whole, and the deeper they pushed, the more the jungle closed around them like a living cage. But stories fueled them, rumors whispered by tribes they encountered. They heard of a land of wealth, a sacred lake, a king of gold. Every tale, no matter how vague, kept them moving. In 1537, Quesada finally stumbled upon the Muisca Confederation, the very civilization from which the original ritual arose. He expected cities of gold. He found instead a sophisticated society with artisans, priests, and rulers, people who worked gold with astonishing skill. But there were no golden streets, no golden temples, only the faint echoes of the Golden King. Quesada had reached the birthplace of the legend, but not the treasure the Spanish imagined. Meanwhile, other conquistadors were already on the hunt. Sebastián de Belalcázar, approaching from the south, heard the same rumors. So did Nikolaus Federmann, a German adventurer marching in from the east 3 expeditions, 3 directions, one obsession. They converged on the same territory. Each convinced they were closest to the treasure. Rivalries exploded. Claims overlapped. Accusations flew. But none had found the Golden City. Still, the myth refused to die. As years passed, the legend grew bolder. The city shifted on maps, moving deeper into the unknown. Sometimes it was hidden in the Amazon basin, sometimes atop the Andes, sometimes beyond the horizon altogether. the hunt became an addiction. One of the most infamous seekers was Francisco de Orellana, who, driven by tales of gold and a mysterious nation of warrior women, ventured into the Amazon lost, starving, and surrounded by hostile tribes. He kept pushing forward, believing that El Dorado lay just beyond the next bend in the river. He never found it, but his journey led to the discovery of the Amazon River itself. Then there was Sir Walter Raleigh, the English courtier, poet, and explorer. He believed the Golden City, now called Manoa, lay near Lake Paraíba in the heart of present-day Venezuela. Raleigh described it vividly, a vast metropolis gleaming with gold and ruled by a mighty emperor. His detailed descriptions ignited Europe's imagination for generations, even though the city he described almost certainly never existed. Still, Raleigh returned again, older and desperate, attempting one final expedition. It failed. His son was killed, and Raleigh himself was executed soon after his return to England. El Dorado had claimed yet another life. But why did so many risk everything for a story? The answer lies in the world they came from. Europe in the 1500s was a place of empire building and desperation. Gold wasn't just treasure. It was power nations rose and fell on the wealth they extracted from newly conquered lands. To the conquistadors, every rumor, every whisper, every glimmer of possibility was enough to march armies into oblivion, and El Dorado offered the ultimate prize. Not a chest of gold, not a mine, but a kingdom overflowing with unlimited riches. In reality, the deeper explorers pushed, the more the jungle swallowed them. Some starved, some were killed by disease or conflict, some simply vanished, leaving behind only broken weapons, abandoned armor, and fragments of diaries describing their final, feverish hopes. Yet the legend thrived, because El Dorado was never just a city. It was an idea, a symbol of everything humans long for: wealth, glory, discovery, and the belief that somewhere out there lies something extraordinary, just waiting to be found. By the end of the 16th century, the fever had consumed thousands, and still no one had found the city of gold. But the obsession was far from over, for if the Golden City was out there, hidden beyond rivers and mountains, someone had to be the first to find it. And that possibility, no matter how small, was enough to keep the hunt alive. Chapter 3. Lake Guatavita. The first clue. Every legend has a birthplace, a physical scar on the map where myth and reality collide. For El Dorado, that place is Lake Guatavita, a quiet, circular lake cradled high in the Andes of Colombia. To the untrained eye, it looks ordinary, peaceful, undisturbed. But for centuries, the world has believed that beneath its still surface lies the greatest treasure never found. It was here, on these cold mountain shores, that the Muisca people performed the ritual that sparked the legend of the Golden King. And it was here that Europeans first found a thread they believed would lead them to the city of gold. To understand the obsession with Lake Guatavita, you have to imagine it the way the conquistadors saw it, not as a lake, but as a gateway. A place where ancient people threw gold into the water willingly, meaning there could be mountains of it resting at the bottom. But the truth was more complicated and far more captivating. When Spanish chroniclers first learned about the Muisca initiation ritual, they were mesmerized. They wrote about the Zipa, his body dusted with powdered gold, gliding across the lake on a ceremonial raft. They described priests casting golden ornaments, emeralds, and sacred offerings into the depths. To the Spanish, this wasn't devotion, it was waste. a waste so enormous it hinted at a civilization overflowing with riches. If they threw this much gold into a lake, the Spanish reasoned, how wealthy must the rest of the kingdom be? And so, Lake Guatavita became the first great clue in the hunt for El Dorado. The earliest attempts to investigate the lake were crude and desperate. In 1545, the conquistadors tried to drain it. They carved deep trenches into the mountainside with primitive tools, hoping the water would pour out and leave the treasure exposed. Hundreds of indigenous people were forced to labor for months, but nature fought back. The trench collapsed. Dozens drowned. The lake remained full, silent, still, undefeated. Over the next decades, 3 more major attempts would follow, each more ambitious than the last. One Spanish governor, obsessed with the legend, ordered thousands of workers to dig a massive cut into the mountain wall. After months of brutal labor, the lake lost some water, revealing a muddy shoreline scattered with a few pieces of gold, a nose ring, a few ornaments, fragments of a ceremony. Not a fortune, but even tiny discoveries fueled bigger dreams. Then came the most dramatic attempt of all, led not by a king or a conquistador, but by a British entrepreneur named Hartley in the 1800s. Determined to succeed where the Spanish had failed, he assembled massive steam-powered pumps and machinery. Thousands watched as the water level dropped dramatically for the first time in centuries. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the treasure would finally reveal itself. But Guatavita had one more secret. As the lake receded, its soft clay walls began to collapse inward. Tons of earth slid down, burying the exposed shoreline and covering whatever lay beneath. The pumps couldn't keep up. Hartley ran out of money. The project failed. Once again, the lake had protected its mystery. Yet with every failure, the legend of El Dorado grew stronger. People began to believe the lake was cursed, enchanted, or perhaps even alive. Something about its perfect circular shape, its unnatural calm, made it feel almost supernatural, like a place designed to hold secrets. But for all the myths surrounding it, Guatavita is very real. Archaeologists today have confirmed that golden offerings truly were thrown into its waters for centuries. But these weren't tributes to wealth. They were gifts to the gods, symbolic offerings from a people who saw gold not as currency, but as spiritual light. Still, that truth didn't stop explorers from believing the lake hid more than ritual treasure. To some, it became a doorway, one that might lead to the legendary city itself. Maps from the 1500s and 1600s often marked the lake as the starting point for the path to El Dorado. From here, the Golden City was believed to lie somewhere beyond the mountains, deep in territories no European had yet explored. Guatavita was the spark, but the flame of obsession burned far beyond it. In the centuries that followed, adventurers would journey east into the Llanos, south toward the Amazon, west into the Andes, and north into the Orinoco Basin, all guided by a single belief that the ritual at Guatavita was only the first clue, not the destination. And so the lake remained both a mystery and a map, a place where history whispered and imagination roared. Today, Lake Guatavita still rests in its quiet mountain cradle. Its waters are calm, its secrets buried. Tourists visit, legends flourish, and treasure hunters still dream. Because even after centuries of failure, the world hasn't let go of the idea that somewhere, beneath that dark surface, the last unclaimed riches of an ancient kingdom still sleep. The Golden King is long gone. The Muisca Empire has faded into memory, but the the lake endures, and with it, the legend of El Dorado refuses to die. Chapter 4. Myth or Reality? Every great legend eventually reaches a crossroads, a moment when belief and doubt collide. For centuries, explorers risked everything chasing the promise of El Dorado, a kingdom overflowing with gold, hidden deep within the uncharted wilderness of the Americas. But as expedition after expedition returned empty-handed, a far more unsettling question began to emerge. Was El Dorado ever real at all? To answer that question, we must step back from the fevered dreams of conquistadors and treasure hunters and return to the people who unknowingly gave birth to the myth, the Muisca. To them, gold was not wealth, it was not power. It was a sacred link to the divine, an earthly reflection of the sun god. When they offered gold to Lake Guatavita, they were not throwing away treasure. They were practicing a spiritual ritual older than European maps, older than Spanish ambition, older than the legend itself. In the Muisca worldview, gold was energy, an offering meant to maintain balance between the physical and spiritual worlds. It was never meant to build cities, or forge empires, or fuel the fantasies of strangers who would cross oceans in search of it. And yet, those strangers misunderstood the ritual entirely. Spanish chroniclers, hearing the story secondhand, magnified it with each retelling. The Golden King became a golden kingdom, then a golden empire, and finally a golden city waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. This is how myths evolve, layer by layer, dream by dream, until the line between truth and imagination dissolves. But let's step back into history. By the late 1500s, the Spanish Empire had already found unimaginable riches in the New World: silver from Potosi, gold from the Caribbean, emeralds from Colombia. They had seen civilizations like the Aztecs and the Inca, whose temples glittered with ornaments and sacred idols. So when they heard that the Muisca bathed a king in powdered gold, their minds leaped immediately to the idea of another wealthy empire waiting to be conquered. It didn't matter that the Muisca lived in moderate-sized communities. It didn't matter that their temples were not made of gold. It didn't matter that their gold work was symbolic, not economic. The Spanish were not listening. They were dreaming. But dreams don't mean lies. There was truth buried inside the legend, truth that has been gradually uncovered by archaeologists over the last century. In the early 1900s, while digging near Lake Guatavita, researchers found dozens of golden artifacts, small figurines, jewelry, ceremonial objects. And in 1969, a farmer unearthed one of the most iconic pieces of Muisca art ever discovered: the golden raft of El Dorado, a detailed depiction of the very ritual that inspired the myth. So yes, the ritual was real. The offerings were real. The Muisca kings existed. Their gold work was extraordinary. But does that mean El Dorado, the city of gold, ever existed? Probably not in the way the conquistadors imagined. There is no evidence of a golden metropolis hidden beneath jungle vines, no ruins of cities plated in gold, no temples carved from giant ingots, and no ancient texts hinting at anything remotely resembling a golden kingdom. Yet something important remains. The legend didn't die. Instead, it transformed. Some modern historians believe El Dorado was never meant to be a physical place. They argue that Europeans misinterpreted a spiritual ritual through the lens of their own greed. To the Muisca, El Dorado, the Golden One, was a king undergoing a sacred transformation. But to the conquistadors, it became a destination, a map point A prize. Others offer a different idea. Perhaps the myth was a patchwork of many truths: gold-rich tribes existed, lost cities existed, vast regions of South America remained unexplored, and people have always woven scattered truths into a single, larger story, like threads forming a tapestry. But the most intriguing theory is this. El Dorado was never about gold. It was about possibility. The world in the 1500s was expanding. New lands, new peoples, new wonders were being discovered every year. To explorers, El Dorado represented the ultimate unknown, the belief that the world still held mysteries too vast, too extraordinary, too magical to fully comprehend. And perhaps that's why the legend survived long after every expedition failed. Because El Dorado wasn't a city made of gold. It was a mirror, reflecting the hopes and ambitions of every person who dared to believe that the impossible might still be out there, waiting. So is El Dorado a myth? Is it a reality, or is it something in between? Maybe the truth is this. El Dorado was never meant to be found. It was meant to be chased. And that chase, spanning centuries, continents, and empires, became a legend more powerful than any treasure could ever be. Chapter 5. The City of Gold That Never Died. Some legends fade with time, erased by war, buried by nature, or forgotten by the people who once believed in them. But some legends endure. They refuse to die. They continue to haunt maps, inspire explorers, and ignite imagination long after their origins have been swallowed by centuries of dust. El Dorado is one of those legends. Even after countless expeditions failed, after scholars debunked the more extravagant claims, after entire empires rose and fell, the world never stopped believing that somewhere, hidden in the wilderness, a city of gold still awaited discovery. But the true story of El Dorado's survival is far more fascinating than any treasure hunt. When the last great Spanish expeditions returned home empty-handed, many expected the legend to die. The jungle had swallowed too many lives, too many hopes, too many men convinced they stood on the brink of discovery, only to be consumed by fever, storms, or tribal resistance. And so, by the end of the 17th century, official interest in the Golden City faded, but legends don't require governments. They require dreamers. In the centuries that followed, El Dorado took on a life of its own. It evolved, adapted, and reappeared in new forms, shifting from historical rumor to cultural myth, from geographic mystery to symbolic truth. By the 1800s, the age of exploration had transformed. Scientists, cartographers, and adventurers scoured the globe in search of lost worlds. Atlantis, the Northwest Passage, the heart of Africa. The idea of a hidden golden city fit perfectly into this era of curiosity and ambition. Writers, poets, and philosophers embraced the legend artists' painted shimmering visions of impossible cities. Novelists wrote stories of explorers who stumbled upon golden palaces in forgotten valleys. Each retelling breathed new life into the legend, pulling it further and further from its Muisca roots and transforming it into something universal. But even as the myth grew larger, the land itself kept whispering hints that something, if not a city of gold, still waited to be understood. Deep in the rainforests of Venezuela, explorers reported sightings of ancient stone structures, ruins unlike anything built by known tribes. In Brazil, entire lost cities were spotted from early aircraft, only to vanish upon closer inspection. In Colombia and Peru, archaeologists uncovered evidence of complex societies, with elaborate goldwork, monumental architecture, and ceremonial centers once thought impossible. None of these discoveries confirmed the existence of El Dorado, but every one of them kept the legend alive. Even today, satellite imagery reveals mysterious geometric patterns carved into remote jungles, possible remains of forgotten civilizations. New archaeological finds continue to emerge from beneath the forest floor, rewriting our understanding of ancient South America. And with every discovery, the world asks the same question. If these cities existed, why not El Dorado? But maybe the real survival of the legend has nothing to do with gold at all. Maybe El Dorado lived on because it represents something deeply human, the yearning for a perfect place, untouched by time, hidden from greed, waiting for the worthy. A paradise of endless possibility, a dream that glitters just beyond reach. To the Spanish, El Dorado was wealth. To explorers, it was discovery. To poets, it was idealism. To dreamers, it was destiny. But to us, today, El Dorado is something else entirely. It is a reminder that some mysteries are greater than their answers, that some stories live not because they are true, but because they inspire, that a ritual at a quiet mountain lake can ripple across centuries, reshaping cultures and capturing imaginations across the world. And perhaps that is why El Dorado never died. Because somewhere, buried beneath the weight of centuries, the legend still calls out, not with the promise of gold, but with the promise of wonder. A reminder that the world is still larger, stranger, and more mysterious than we dare to imagine. Even if there is no city of gold, the idea of El Dorado survives. In the maps explorers draw, in the stories filmmakers tell, in the dreams adventurers chase, and in the hearts of everyone who believes there are still secrets waiting to be found. The Golden City may not exist, but the Golden Dream does. El Dorado lives on, not as stone or gold or ruins, but as the legend that refuses to die. If you enjoyed this journey into myth and mystery, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Empire for more stories from the shadows of history. And remember, some legends aren't meant to be found. Some are meant to be followed.